Hello, good afternoon. My name is Joy Young, and I'm Vice President of Programs here at South Arts. Thank you for joining us on our webinar, Sharing Southern Cultural Treasures. I'll begin with a brief overview of what we will talk about today. So we'll start with an About South Arts, and that section will be led by our President and CEO, Susie Serkimer. We'll give an overview of the program and answer your questions about the program through a Q&A. We want to explain to you a bit about the selection process and then again share with you some of our future opportunities with the program, ending with our Q&A session. Next slide. So just so you understand how to navigate our webinar, I would ask that you use the question and answer box in Zoom to type your questions, and we will answer those questions. If we don't get to all of the questions, please know that we will have an FAQ where your question and our response will be addressed. This webinar would also be live on our website. Live captions are available for this webinar. You can enable or disable those live captions in your Zoom window controls. And finally, please look out for a survey so that we can get your feedback about this webinar and other kinds of information you'd like to share with us here at South Arts. Your feedback is vital to us. Next slide. So let me take a moment to introduce our Southern Cultural Treasures team. I'd like to start with Dolores Pringle. Dolores is serving as our contracted program coordinator. We're so excited to have her. She brings such a wealth of experience with programs, program development, implementation. So Dolores will give a deeper dive explanation and introduction to the program. Here in just a moment, we'll have our President and CEO, Susie Serkimer, walk you through a little bit about South Arts, and then I will return to talk more about our programs and services. Again, let me introduce our President and CEO, Susie Serkimer. Susie?
Thank you, Joy. And as Joy said, I am Susie Serkimer, President and CEO of South Arts. Welcome to this webinar today. We've had an incredible response and are so excited about how many of you are interested in this program. So South Arts is one of 6 regional nonprofit arts organizations. All the states in the country are a member of one of the regional arts organizations. We serve the 9 southern states, as you see here, ranging from North Carolina, going south through Florida, west to Louisiana, and then Tennessee and Kentucky. Our board of directors represent all 9 states. Our role as a regional arts organization is to provide services, programs, and grants that fund multiple states at one time, usually all 9, but occasionally fewer, and that frequently depends on the funding source. Our mission is to advance Southern vitality through the arts, as you can see on the screen. Our goals focus on, I'm not going to read the goals, you can read them on our website, but the short version is our goals focus on individual artists, connecting, partnering, and trying to bring resources to the South and unlock more resources that already exist in the South. We have a goal that focuses on community, and then also one that focuses on visibility and trying to bring arts organizations, communities, and individual artists in the South more visibility within our region as well as nationally. We have a plan that takes us to FY25, and we're working hard to accomplish it. In this plan, we are increasing efforts with individual artists and art forms as far as the number of art forms that we are working with. We respond to regional trends. We are working hard to increase the number of constituents that we work with and also the types of constituents. So today, the Southern Cultural Treasures webinar, we are excited about this opportunity that we have been able to secure funds for, and excited that this opportunity is a wonderful opportunity for the South and such an impact to our region and for the organizations that we will be working with. We hope that it is just the first of several initiatives that South Arts will be able to initiate related to working with BIPOC organizations. So with that overview of South Arts, I'll turn it back to Joy Young, our Vice President of Programs. Joy?
Thank you so much, Susie. So Susie spoke earlier about our goals. And within our goals, we animate them through our programs. Our programs serve artists and organizations and communities. On the slide, you'll see several of our grant programs, or really all of our grant programs that we currently offer. And I want to highlight those that are available to artists and communities and arts organizations right now. Jazz Road provides funding for individual artists, jazz artists, to tour the country. Visit our website to learn more. Southern Prize and State Fellows, a program for individual visual artists. Express Grants for Rural Communities provides opportunities for communities to bring in performing artists for touring and educational engagements. Presentation grants. Professional development and artistic planning grants. Southern Cultural Treasures, and we'll learn more here in just a moment. Arts Ready, Creative Placemaking Summit, and Emerging Leaders of Color are all programs that are currently open. Again, visit our website, www.southarts.org, to learn more. Next slide. As Susie mentioned, South Arts is so pleased to provide opportunities to serve BIPOC-led and serving arts organizations here within our region. So South Arts' purpose in supporting Southern Cultural Treasures is to acknowledge and honor the diversity of artistic expression and excellence of Southern arts organizations led by and serving people of color in our region. And I think it's so important to also recognize that this program is part of a larger initiative that was funded by the Ford Foundation and many other foundations nationally. South Arts is pleased to be able to bring forward this program for the region. Next slide, please. So what are Southern Cultural Treasures? Well, Susie's already mentioned about our longer term goals, our plan, if you will, for working here in the region. Set in context of the larger initiative, Southern Cultural Treasures ultimately represent their unique cultural and ethnic traditions, regardless of national origin. But we see it's so important to establish a model of funding that supports these organizations that have historically been underfunded and undersupported over time. So you'll see that our goal is to build an equity-focused regional funding model. We're so excited to be able to bring this program, and as Susie shared, other programs that serve BIPOC organizations. I'll also share a bit more about those characteristics we're looking for in a Southern Cultural Treasure grantee. Of course, must be located in our 9-state region, but the mission of the organization should be primarily focused on the arts or cultural heritage or creative expression in any arts discipline. We want to make sure that Southern cultural treasures have a legacy of stewarding and sustaining artistry, cultural heritage, or creative expression rooted in a community of color. Another characteristic is an organization that has a history of producing or presenting artists or creatives of color in performances, exhibitions, or other artistic or cultural production. We want our Southern cultural treasure to be one that has a history of preservation of artistic and or cultural heritage traditions, again, rooted in a community of color, and a positive impact on the community of color served. So we expect those organizations who are ultimately selected to represent one or more of those characteristics I just shared. Next slide, please. So ultimately, through our three-step process, and I'll share a bit more about that three-step process shortly, we anticipate that we will award between 12 and 15 organizations and provide each general operating support of up to $300,000, and those funds would be distributed over 3 years. We would also award project grants of up to $7,500. And so these project grants would allow one of our grantees or the grantee to engage in a project. Maybe there is a need for technology, or maybe there's a need for upfitting or upgrading areas within the organization. And then we will also be able to provide networking and cohort building and knowledge sharing based on the needs of the organizations that are selected. We believe that it's so important that this program helps organizations achieve stabilization and growth. Next slide. So that three-step process. Dolores will share with you the actual letter of intent, which is the first step. That first step, the letter of intent to participate, signals your interest in engaging in this work. Even if you are not among the 12 to 15 organizations selected, we will be able to understand what your needs are, and as an organization, work hard to find ways to address the needs that are identified through this process. Our commitment to serving BIPOC organizations expands beyond just this grant. So I would encourage you, if you have any interest in participating in opportunities for funding, for services, for knowledge sharing, for networking, I would urge you to complete a letter of intent to participate. Of those people who submit their letter of intent to participate, we will select roughly 40 organizations who will be invited to submit a full application. And of those 40, we will ultimately select roughly 20 organizations who will engage in an interview process and discussion so that we can ultimately select the 12 to 15 who will be named Southern Cultural Treasures. So what's the timeline? Next slide, please. So we just launched the program, and we're so excited to have received such wonderful feedback here regionally and nationally. Today's webinar is already in progress. The letter of intent to participate is due December 10th. Mark that calendar date, folks. December 10th is when you must have your letter of intent to participate submitted. We anticipate inviting the top 40 in early February. So if you have not heard from us by early February, you can anticipate or assume that you've not been selected to move forward. That does not mean that there are no other opportunities. It just means that you've not been selected for this particular opportunity. The deadlines then for us to select the top 20 would be roughly April, and we would announce a final cohort of our first Southern Cultural Treasures in early May. So that's our timeline. Don't forget that deadline to submit your letter of interest to participate, December 10th. Next slide, please. So to share a bit more about how we've arrived at this moment, we wanted to ensure that we as South Arts understood a bit more broadly about the field. So we've been doing our own research, if you will, understanding what organizations currently reside, what is our landscape. And we've been pleased to have had Dolores doing some outreach, understanding again what kinds of BIPOC organizations reside in our region. To date, we've identified over 300 BIPOC-led and serving organizations in our region. Part of this work, we also realized, requires the building of networks of support, networks of knowledge, and networks of funding. And we believe those networks help build an infrastructure for both funding and capacity building. So this slide shows the work we have done and are doing to inform the full context of this program. Next slide, please. So for those who are selected to become Southern Cultural Treasures, we will again provide funding, provide technical assistance and convening, create public awareness and visibility through our PR and marketing, as well as networking and connections, all to achieve the self-defined success that each organization has put forward for themselves. Many funding opportunities have the funder dictating the outcomes. We want to work in partnership with the 12 to 15 organizations selected to help them achieve the success that they've defined for themselves. And this is exciting work. There are many things we don't know, but we want to work in partnership with those organizations who have been selected to arrive together at that self-defined success. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit more about that letter of interest to participate and the grants portal you will use to submit your application. It's called the Go Smart Grant Portal. Next slide. So before you get ready to submit that LOIP, there are a few things that will be handy for you to have ready just so you can complete that LOIP and you're not having to stop and come back and forth. I would say you should dedicate between 45 minutes to 1 hour to complete that LOIP. Make sure you have handy all of your organizational and management information, because we're going to ask questions about your mission, and we do want you to be able to have that mission in full in front of you. We're going to ask questions about your strategic plan. You're going to need to know the demographics of your staff, your board, audience, artists, volunteers, and participants. And we will want those numbers very specifically. So you want to go ahead and make sure you have those numbers handy before you get started. Again, we'll want some information that should be in your strategic plan. And if you don't have one, don't sweat it. You'll just answer the question accordingly. You will have an opportunity to upload any programs, documents, perhaps any brochures or flyers about your programs and services. You'll also be able to provide links to your website and again, links to your most recent programs and services. We'll want some financial information, so please have budget, income, and expenses information handy for the past 3 years. Generally, your Form 990, your IRS Form 990 will have that information, so you may want to have that handy. Be thinking about the professional and organizational development needs your organization has, and perhaps you and your staff may have. You'll be asked to click check boxes about the kinds of professional and organizational needs you have. So keep those in mind. You will be asked to answer some very specific questions and about your organization through a narrative. Dolores will talk about those specific questions here shortly. It is highly recommended that you use a Word document or some document to type out your thoughts and then copy and paste those narratives into the application, just to save yourself some time, but to also give yourself the time to think about how you want to respond to those questions. So I'm sure by now you're wanting to just dive into that LOIP process. And so to do that, Ivan, go to the next slide. You'll visit our website, and it's listed on the slide, www.southarts.org/programs, conferences, /Southern Cultural Treasures. The landing page is shown and demonstrated on this slide. From this slide, you would scroll to the bottom of the page to arrive at the application portal. That application portal, if you hit the slide again, Ivan, there you go. That is the area where you log into the GoSmart application. Next slide, please. Your very next slide, next page, once you log into the application, is the landing page for GoSmart. If you hit the slide again, Ivan, there you go. That's where you will log in. First, create your profile. And once you've saved your application, if you must come back before submitting, you would log back in to get to your application to continue your application. So we've shared a lot so far, and now I'm going to turn the webinar over to Dolores, and Dolores will walk you through the questions on the letter of intent to participate, and will share with you those narrative questions that you will need to take some time to think about, to answer, so that we as reviewers have an opportunity to understand how you talk about your organization. Dolores, again, thank you so much for joining us and for being our person who is going to be the primary contact person and the lead on our program and its administration. So I'll hand things over to Dolores Pringle. Thank you, Dolores.
Thank you, Joy. And hello, everyone. When you're logging into the portal, the GoSmart portal, if you're new to South Arts, you can go to Start, but if you have applied for grants in the past with South Arts, you can immediately go to Login. There's also a PDF version of the LOI that you can download and use as you collect your information, and it will help guide you through the LOI process. The letter of intent is divided into basically 5 sections. The first section is titled About Your Organization. And these are rather standard questions, like where you are, who you are, your EIN number, and your mission. However, there are also a list of BIPOC questions. Ivan, will you advance to the next slide? And these BIPOC questions are very important because they will determine your eligibility. And as you can see, there are questions like what percentage of your staff are BIPOC, your audience, your board, your artists. So give some thought to those percentages because those are eligibility questions. There's also another key question in section 1, and it has to do with presentation or preservation. And it is a narrative question, so it will require a narrative description of mission and programs. In this section, you can also upload brochures, program announcements, and flyers, anything that will help us get to know you better and what you do and who you serve. Next slide, please. The second section is titled Financial and Operations Information. And it is basically requesting financial and operational information such as budget, audit, operational expenses, strategic planning processes, and deficits. Next slide, please. Section 3 is titled Sources of Income. And it is asking for revenue sources of income. But there's also a narrative component in section 3. Read it carefully and provide a well-crafted response. At the end of section 3 is a key question. It is asking you to describe how an influx of capital would help the organization with long-term sustainability. I suggest giving some time to your response to that question. Section 4 is titled Professional and Organizational Development. All these questions require narrative answers, and those answers should be well thought out. And they deal with questions such as development, fundraising, planning activities, facilities, and real estate management, leadership development. And section 4 also will allow you to include activities that are not listed there. So provide us with those activities because again, it will help us to get to know you, who you are, and what you do. The next section is titled Self-Determined Success. This section has one key question. It requires a narrative response. And I would suggest that you have an internal discussion about that question with your board and your staff before writing and submitting your response. Self-determined success, the answer to that question and how you address it will give us some really important information about what you look like and what you want to look like in the future. And don't forget that all of your narrative questions are going to be character limited. So you need to be as clear and as concise as possible with your answers. And if you have questions as you are completing the LOI, please reach out to me and I'm happy to help guide you through it. And don't forget again that your deadline is November 10th for submission of the LOI. We will now engage in a question and answer session, and it will be moderated by Joy. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you.
So you may type your questions in the Q&A box, and I will answer questions as they come through. Will you share the list of BIPOC organizations you have identified? We may want to include work we are already doing with them in our LOI. I will respond to that offline. let me respond to that offline. What is the character limit for the narrative questions? Dolores, I'm going to ask you to take a look and get back to me on that question. Let's see, I have someone who is saying thank you. The next question, do all grant recipients receive both the general operating grant and a project grant? Yes. All recipients receive both the general operating grant of $300,000 and a project grant of $7,500. I want to correct one item Dolores shared. The LOIP closes December 10th, not November.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Okay, I'm clarifying. Thank you for that. Let's see. Will this recorded presentation be made available? Yes, it will be on our website. Give us a few days to get it taken care of. It is Friday, so we'll make sure we get that up on our website. This program will cover all arts disciplines, So the primary 5, literary arts, visual arts, performing arts, media, film arts. Again, they are centered in ethnic or cultural production. They center on the artists or communities. Another question, what is the time frame you will be seeking demographic information? I'm not quite sure what that question means, but if I understand how long will we be doing our landscape, understanding who's in the community, I think that's an ongoing process. As far as informing who is out there, again, that is an ongoing process if I'm understanding the correct question correctly. Can your business be a startup to participate in this program? A for-profit will need to work with a nonprofit fiduciary. We currently have an expectation that we would work with a nonprofit, but I would be glad to have an offline conversation to understand more about the startup business aspect of your question. So reach out to Dolores and we will speak with you more one-on-one to get a sense of your of what you want to accomplish. Is a public art program for municipality eligible to receive? So we are not funding cities. We're not funding colleges or universities. The LOIP demographics questions were mentioned as eligibility questions. So that means, is your organization BIPOC led and serving is an eligibility question. Ideally, the answer is yes. Is your organization located in the South Arts 9-state region? That is an eligibility question. The answer should be yes. Isn't this opportunity also open to fiscally sponsored? Yes, it is. So years in operation, I may only have a 3-year projection. So let me share just a bit more about and go back to the characteristics of the Southern Cultural Treasure. And if you'll just give me just a moment. The characteristics of a Southern Cultural Treasure, while we have not specifically given a length of time that an organization would be in operation, the word legacy of stewarding and sustaining artistry, legacy, history of producing or presenting. So those words do mean something longer than 3 years. I would say that legacy of stewarding and sustaining, and history of producing and presenting, preservation, are all activities that have generally happened over a span of time. Another question, we have been presenting pop-up exhibitions for several years as we plan for a hybrid and in-person museum. Are organizations that do not currently have a facility eligible for this funding? Yes, organizations that do not currently have a facility are eligible for this funding. Is the deadline, we've addressed that again, that deadline is December 10th. Can an organization that applies for a general operating grant also apply for a project grant? As stated earlier, the organizations that are selected as Southern Cultural Treasures will receive both the general operating support grant and the project support grant. They are not separate grants. What would be considered a BIPOC-led and serving organization? That is a great question. And so I am going to say that for the purposes of this program, the term community of color can refer to a group of people, geography, or communities of creative practice. The term BIPOC-led and serving arts and cultural organizations are defined as those that have at least 51% of staff and or board being composed of communities of color, and more than 51% of the organization's activities are related to and or engage communities of color. You would find that in the actual guidelines found on our website at southarts.org. How do we reach Ms. Pringle for support? Her email address is culturaltreasures@southarts.org. culturaltreasures@southarts.org. Her information has also been put in the chat. Is there a requisite size of the organization for consideration? No, there is not. We certainly understand that many BIPOC-led and serving organizations have historically been underfunded with budgets that are quite small. We find that BIPOC organizations have done quite a bit with a little bit of money. So there is not a budget size expectation. Again, we'll repeat the deadline. That deadline is December 10th. I've answered again what would be considered a BIPOC serving organization. I'm reading a question. For the full application, should the organization's proposed budget for the program request the same general operating support across 3 years, or can an organization consider a gradual increase for each year to reflect? So this first, there is not a request for funding. You are submitting your application or your interest to participate in the program. So you do not have to make a request for a particular budget. The funds will be awarded each year up to the $300,000. We anticipate if we were to say $100,000 per year, we are not sure what that dollar amount per year will be. We anticipate, however, roughly $100,000 per year. But there is not a particular request that the letter of intent to participate asks. What is the time frame between learning that you've been accepted and submitting a full application? Roughly 1 month. There are 9 states included in South Arts? Yes, we are. A question, would it be possible for a state park system to apply. If it's part of state or federal government, you would not be eligible to apply, nor would a state or college or university be eligible to apply. Still lots of questions about BIPOC organization. And again, I would defer you to the website. I'm still reading our questions. Are there specific quotas you are looking for regarding organizational demographics? Excuse me. I would say again that the definition of BIPOC-led and serving is our guide for how we are filtering, if you will, what the BIPOC-led and serving looks like. There is a question, does the size of the organization, staff, and budget affect your decision to fund? I will say no. It is the totality of the entire letter of intent to participate, as well as how you are responding to those narrative questions, specifically your organizational aspirations. We want you to, again, take very seriously those questions, the narrative opportunities, because they give us more a sense of the organization in addition to just the numbers. Again, the question, what if your organization does not have a paid staff? That is just fine. You are not required to have paid staff to participate in this program. There's a question again around years of existence, and those keywords of legacy and stewarding are keywords in the characteristics of a Southern cultural treasure. Whether or not one's work for its particular community can be defined or described as history or legacy, it is really going to come through with how you talk about your organization. There's a question around, can a consortia of several organizations help one's organization meet the diversity? No, because we are funding a specific organization. I would be interested in learning more about what that question means. So please reach out to Dolores specifically so we can learn more about your question. The organization's programs can be a mix of virtual and in-person programming. So the question is, can the project, and I'm assuming that means the programs that the applicant produces, can those projects or programs be in person and or virtual? And the answer is yes. As the Southern Cultural Treasures are ultimately selected, we do anticipate having both in-person and virtual convenings. Another question, can we submit an actual audit or will the 990 suffice? And is this different from the budget for clarity? So we do not need your audit, nor do we need to see a copy of your 990. Having those documents in front of you will just help you answer the questions more quickly, but we do not need to see or have access to either of those documents for the letter of intent to participate. So there's another question. What if the project or the organization is BIPOC-led and serving, but the physical sponsor is not? That is just fine. Another question, can an organization be founded using this grant? The answer is no. Would it be necessary to partner with an existing nonprofit to make it eligible? Again, the answer is no. Another question, can funding be used for building projects? The answer is yes. The organizations selected as as Southern Cultural Treasures can in fact use their funds in any ways that help build sustainability for the organization. That means infrastructure projects, that means staffing and capacity building. There again may be many uses for the $300,000, and the organization could perhaps use that funding for building projects. And great question here. Because of the special circumstances of the pandemic, many of us have not been at full programming mode. Well, may we refer to programs within the past 4 years in our narratives? Of course you may. And again, the opportunity to upload those support materials will demonstrate what you have been doing in the past. Answering some more questions. So a few questions just about the numbers and are estimates acceptable? For the letter of intent to participate, our scrutiny of your data, in other words, are we going to hold your feet to the fire with what initially goes into the LOI? Probably not. What I will say is if you are selected, we will be offering much more scrutiny to the organization. So ideally, while you may present estimates, ultimately, we're really wanting to work with real data, live data, so that if you are selected, you don't find yourself falling out of contention because your information was just completely off and completely wrong. So I would ask that you utilize the most current and up-to-date information as you are making your submission. So we're coming up on roughly the last 10 minutes of our webinar, and I will continue to answer questions so long as we have them coming in and we have time. So I have another question. Whether or not the LOIP would be for a specific initiative and within a department. And no, this program is about the totality of the organization, not its specific programming, not specific elements. Again, if we just go back to the goal and the purpose of the program, it is to really position an organization for long-term stability and long-term success. And while we believe that a program of the organization is important, programs and projects can change. It's the long-term stability of the organization that we really want to focus on. So the LOIP is not about a specific initiative or department within the organization. While it may be a key element that you would mention, we're looking for you to talk about the totality of your organization. Another great question. Are matching funds required? They are not. What are the reporting requirements if selected for support? Great question. We would be working with each organization as they have defined self-determined success. The reporting requirements would be useful for knowing, have you achieved? Have you achieved the success you wanted to achieve? How are you making progress for that? Ultimately, we would want to know whether or not the funds and the support that we are developing or will be developing alongside each grantee are those making a difference for the organization. So the requirements we would have questions that you would be answering. We would want you to be able to speak to changes, particular outcomes that you set for yourself and that you've achieved those outcomes. We do know that oftentimes reporting requirements can be kind of onerous, and we believe working with each grantee, again, to get to whatever those outcomes are just one element of understanding whether or not we've been successful or not. A question about a specific organization. My organization teaches free art classes to kids in communities of color. Do we qualify? I would urge you to again visit our website, southarts.org, our Southern Cultural Treasures page, to again understand those qualifications and what we believe those characteristics of a Southern Cultural Treasure would be. Again, lots of questions about how many years are required. And I would say that history of production and legacy of stewarding are key words. So if 4 and 5 years, you're able to make a compelling argument of history and legacy, that is entirely up to you. I'm reading some more questions. Sole proprietorships, working in a sole proprietorship might be eligible if they meet the characteristics of a Southern cultural treasure and work in partnership with a fiscal agent. Again, an audit is not required for the letter of intent to apply. A great question: how will submissions be judged and by whom? We will secure a group, panelists, ideally from outside of the region, because we can imagine many who are in the region may in fact want to apply. We imagine that our panelists would also represent the depth and the breadth of the diversity of the applicants. We would not release the names of who will do adjudication prior to that process. We found in the past that sometimes applicants reach out to the jurors, but we will conduct an internal review for eligibility and then pass the final process of identification to a panel. And that panel would then recommend back to South Arts for ultimate approval to move forward to the application stage. I'm still reading questions. Again, I'm just reading through some questions. I have a question here. Can funds be used for capital campaigns? And I would say no. I would say no. However, this anonymous attendee, please reach out to us to have some more conversation of exactly what it is you're looking to do, okay? I'm reading more questions here. Lots of questions about eligibility and if the organization has one area that is BIPOC on staff, but maybe not BIPOC because of board and such, are they eligible? And I would just ask you again to read how we're defining BIPOC-led and serving. If you have a unique or very special case, I would love to have you reach out to us to learn more about what that special case is or what it looks like. But our guidelines, I think, offer a definition that we feel very comfortable with in creating this opportunity for, again, BIPOC-led and serving, which means any organization led by and serving people of color, and that this is the spectrum of people of color regardless of national origin. I will share that the national listing of organizations receiving funding would mirror exactly our interest in funding. Alaskan or Native heritage organizations, African American, Latinx, Chinese, again, Native American, any ethnic group in our South Arch region that represents people of color are eligible. There is no distinction that a Latino organization would not be considered eligible, or one South Asian. We are not making that distinction at all. Someone's asking, can we please post the national list? The Ford Foundation's website, Ford Foundation's America's Cultural Treasures. And if you do a quick Google search, you will see the national list funded by Ford in roughly early 2021, if not late 2022. So I'm going to pass over to Dolores and ask, Dolores, did you get the character limit for the narrative responses?
Yes, I believe it's 5,000.
I hope that helps. 5,000 characters for for the narrative response, for the narrative responses. Well, I want to say thank you all for your time, for joining us. For those questions that you did not feel were answered quite the way you needed them answered, I would ask you to reach out to Dolores with your question. We will develop a series of FAQs based on these questions, and we will share them on our website. I would say definitely within the next week. We are at Friday. So our last slide, Ivan. We want to say thank you for participating. You will receive a survey, and we would ask you to please complete the survey. Give us your feedback because it's incredibly important. Thank you for joining us as we share the application process and our vision and hopes for our Southern Cultural Treasures Initiative. Happy Friday and have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.